How much do we really know about the stars we admire, and how often do the images we see on screen hide the truth of who they are when no one is watching? Have you ever thought about the way fame can shape a person's character, either lifting them to greatness or exposing something much darker? For 3 decades, Johnny Carson held a unique position as the man who invited the world's biggest stars to his stage night after night, making us laugh, making us believe, and sometimes making us wonder. But as much as audiences adored the glittering performances and charming interviews, Carson's own view was often far less glamorous. Behind his steady smile and quick wit, he carried a mental list of celebrities he couldn't stand. People he believed were cruel, arrogant, or simply rotten at the core. He never read the list aloud, never published it, but in quiet moments with friends, Carson revealed names that shocked those who thought they knew Hollywood's brightest stars. His measure of character wasn't about awards, box office numbers, or headlines. It was about how someone treated the powerless, the assistants, the makeup artists, the floor crew. If a star was kind to them, Carson respected them, even if they were difficult guests. But if they showed cruelty or arrogance, he remembered. That quiet standard shaped a hidden blacklist of Hollywood icons who, to him, revealed their darkest sides when the cameras weren't rolling. And at the top of that list was Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was a household name, renowned as a comedian, actor, director, and tireless charity worker, especially famous for raising funds for children's health through yearly TV shows. Millions adored his silly humor and boundless energy. But Carson saw a very different side. Staff recounted that Lewis treated workers disrespectfully, yelling orders and refusing to learn anyone's names, dismissively calling crew, "Hey you," or "camera guy." His cruelty extended beyond the lower-level staff, reaching Carson himself. In one infamous episode, Lewis interrupted Carson constantly, monopolizing questions intended for other guests, and shocked everyone by fixing Carson's tie without permission. A strict taboo in the studio, signaling a power play. What disgusted Carson most was Lewis's hypocrisy. While Lewis cried on camera during charity segments, playing the saint who adored children, off-camera he was insulting, dismissive, and downright mean toward those who couldn't help his career. Finally, in the early 1980s, Carson banned Lewis from The Tonight Show, a rare action reserved for the most egregious behavior. Carson called him the embodiment of what happens when ego exceeds talent, marking Lewis as truly hateful in a town full of big egos and fakes. Then there was Mickey Rooney, the boy who once charmed the world with his bright eyes and boundless energy. He had been the most popular actor in America at one point, a symbol of youthful spirit, appearing in dozens of films that defined Hollywood's golden age. To audiences, Rooney was the eternal kid who never seemed to lose his sparkle. But Carson knew a different Rooney, one who carried fame like a shield for reckless behavior. By the time he sat in Carson's guest chair during the 1970s, Rooney's antics had become a headache. He often arrived intoxicated, slurring his words, stumbling through stories, sometimes even forgetting what he was talking about mid-sentence. On one live broadcast, he veered into inappropriate territory discussing Judy Garland, leaving Carson visibly uncomfortable as he quickly cut the conversation short. What disturbed Carson even more was Rooney's behavior toward women. Staff recalled the actor holding women's hands far too long, pulling them closer, and whispering suggestive comments that crossed boundaries. Carson, who rarely stepped into moral policing, found himself apologizing afterward to female guests and assistants embarrassed by Rooney's conduct. Over time, The Tonight Show quietly reduced his appearances, even rescheduling them for earlier in the day to limit alcohol-related chaos. To Carson, Rooney became the symbol of a star who never grew up, who thought the rules no longer applied, and who used fame as a shield for actions that would have ended the career of anyone else. Bette Davis stood in a category all her own. With her commanding voice and unforgettable performances, she was a force in Hollywood, the kind of actress who could silence a room with a single glance. She won awards, inspired generations, and cemented her place in cinema history. But when she walked into Carson's world, she brought a storm with her. Crew members described her as combative, barking orders, demanding adjustments, and unleashing biting insults when things weren't to her liking. Carson, who admired her acting talent, soon realized her charm disappeared the moment cameras stopped rolling. Davis had a habit of interrupting other guests, particularly younger women, overshadowing them with cutting remarks or dismissive gestures. She thrived on dominance, making sure the spotlight never shifted from her. The staff remembered her sharp tongue not only toward colleagues but toward crew members, some recalling sexist and even racist outbursts when alcohol loosened her filter. Carson rarely called out guests, But on one occasion, he snapped back at Davis, demanding she show respect or remain silent, a rebuke that stunned her into submission. Though he maintained professional politeness, Carson privately resolved she would never again be welcome. For him, Davis represented the ruthless cruelty that stained Hollywood's golden age, a reminder that brilliance on screen could hide deep fractures behind it. And then there was Frank Sinatra, perhaps the most famous entertainer of his era, the voice that defined a generation, the man who embodied cool itself. To millions, he was the epitome of class, charisma, and effortless style. But behind the glamour, Sinatra carried a reputation for volatility, and Carson witnessed it firsthand. He rarely traveled alone, bringing with him a small army of men who loomed in the background, intimidating staff and creating tension wherever they went. To the crew, it felt like the mob had walked into the studio. One evening, a floor manager approached Sinatra with a routine 3-minute warning, something every guest received. Sinatra erupted, threatening the man and leaving him shaken. Carson nearly cancelled the segment in the moment but reluctantly proceeded. What bothered him most was Sinatra's constant disregard for the show's rhythm. He would cancel last minute, sometimes after arriving at the studio, throwing production into chaos. Worse, during one commercial break, he delivered a cruel remark to a female staff member, which prompted Carson to defend his team directly, something he rarely did in public. That confrontation marked the beginning of the end for Sinatra's frequent appearances, which were cut down to almost none. To Carson, Sinatra was the perfect contradiction. Beloved by millions for his charm yet despised behind the scenes for bullying those who couldn't fight back. Joan Crawford was the final name on Carson's secret list, and in many ways, she encapsulated everything he despised about Hollywood's darker side. On screen, she was radiant, graceful, the very definition of old Hollywood glamour. Off-screen, she was merciless. Crawford arrived with demands that bordered on absurd, dictating the exact angle of her chair, the precise temperature of the studio, and dismissing The Tonight Show's renowned makeup artists in favor of her personal team. It wasn't just perfectionism. It was cruelty disguised as control. Staff remembered how she berated a young assistant so viciously that everyone present froze in disbelief. She demanded the assistant be fired on the spot, though producers refused. Crawford could sit in icy silence during breaks, then switch instantly into dazzling charm the moment the cameras came back on. Carson described the experience of interviewing her as trying to talk to a statue. Lifeless when the lights dimmed, artificial when they returned. Later, when Crawford's daughter revealed shocking details of abuse in her memoir, Carson admitted he wasn't surprised. He had seen glimpses of the monster hidden behind the legend. For him, Joan Crawford was the very embodiment of Hollywood's darkest truth. The image of perfection masking a soul consumed by control and cruelty. Through it all, Carson carried himself with the same quiet dignity that made him beloved by audiences. He smiled, laughed, and kept the show rolling, but in his mind, he never forgot what he had witnessed. For him, the test of a person's character wasn't measured in Oscars, record sales, or headlines. It was in how they treated those with no influence. The makeup artist adjusting powder, the assistant carrying coffee, the floor manager giving a time signal. These were the people who mattered most in revealing true character. If someone could show them kindness, Carson believed it spoke volumes. If someone treated them with cruelty, it told an even bigger story. Carson's quiet list wasn't about grudges or petty dislike. It was about values. He believed kindness was not optional, but the baseline of being human. When he saw guests who rose above ego to treat everyone with decency, he respected them endlessly, even if they weren't easy interviews. But when he witnessed cruelty, hypocrisy, or abuse of power, it burned into his memory, and those names would never be forgiven. His disapproval wasn't loud or public, but it was lasting, and everyone close to him knew the stories. Over time, the list of stars he quietly despised became a reflection not of Hollywood's talent, but of its flaws. So the next time we see the highlight reels, the awards, or the glossy magazine covers, it's worth pausing to remember the lessons Carson carried. Stardom is temporary, talent fades, but character, how you treat people when no one is watching, echoes forever. His stories remind us not just of the legends he admired, but of the ones he quietly condemned, whose behavior behind the curtains told a very different tale than their smiles under the spotlight. And that contradiction, more than anything else, was what fascinated Carson most. Carson's perspective also offers us something deeper to think about as viewers. We often fall in love with the roles, the glamour, and the crafted personas that celebrities present, But Carson had the rare vantage point of seeing the difference between performance and reality. For him, The Tonight Show wasn't only about entertaining millions, it was also a mirror of human behavior, a stage where the true character of some of the most famous people in the world revealed itself when they thought no one was paying attention. And that's why his secret blacklist remains so fascinating even today. It wasn't just gossip, it was his personal measure of morality in a world that often rewarded ego and cruelty. The names he shared with friends weren't chosen lightly. They stood as examples of what he despised most about Hollywood. They were reminders that fame, wealth, and talent can hide deep flaws, but behind closed doors, the truth always emerges. If you found this story as eye-opening as Johnny Carson's perspective itself, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from the golden age of Hollywood and beyond.